So the next thing I want to do with my class is I want to teach everyone how to tie in Mongo into your Express apps. And so this is new because we've done Express and we've done Mongo and we've kept them separate. But now we need to learn to bring the two things together so that our routes in Express can work with Mongo database resources. And so go ahead and log in, right? Everyone can get to the screen where you see your cluster 0 and click on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on connect, and I'm going to click on drivers. It says connect to your application, right? So we're going to be building an Express application. So I'm going to click on drivers. And you're going to notice right here, here's my connection string. So we've used this connection string to connect to Compass, but now we're going to be using this connection string to connect into Express. And it says replace password. So you replace this, including the angle brackets. You're getting rid of the angle brackets and the word password with the password for EA Gudmested. Okay. So this is called connecting using the MongoDB driver. And you're going to see there is a command, there's an npm command to install this dependency. So as we've learned a little bit about Express, remember there's different dependencies and different packages that we have to bring in. We're just going to kind of start all over. We're going to start, let's go ahead and create a new folder on our desktop or wherever you want to create it. And we'll call this MongoDB Driver Demo. Your mileage may vary. It doesn't really name what you call it. Doesn't matter too much what you call it. And let's open that with code. So open your folder with code. And get rid of the welcome screen. And let's start with the terminal. And I'm going to do an npm init -y. Again, remember the /y kind of assumes the defaults. And that creates a package.json. With an index.js being your main entry point. Okay, so we need to make a file called index.js. And we don't have any scripts right now. So maybe we'll make a start script that'll run node index.js. Maybe we do a start dev, which does node-mon index.js. Maybe I need to do double quotes here. Likes double quotes better. Okay. You change the license should you choose. I mean, this is just going to be, we're not going to put this anywhere, so it's fine. Okay, let's do an npm install express. Let's close package.json before you run that command. Close your package.json so you don't get some conflicts. Let's install express. And if you open that back up, you can see now there's a dependency of Express. And let's bring in our MongoDB driver, right? So you can see here the command to bring in MongoDB driver is npm I MongoDB. So let's do npm I MongoDB. All right, there's MongoDB. So we now have our MongoDB driver. We kind of got in the habit of using the newer modules. I know the demo doesn't use the newer modules, so we'll use the older system for now. So the older module system, which is fine. Okay, now if you kind of scroll down here, connecting with the MongoDB driver, Mongo has a tutorial that we're basically going to follow. We're going to follow this getting started with the node driver. So you can click on that, and it opens up this page here, MongoDB node driver. And I'm going to scroll down to the fundamentals to connect to MongoDB. So I'm going to click on this link to connect to MongoDB. And this is what we're following right now. All right, so here we go. Learn how to configure your application's connection to a MongoDB deployment using the node driver, how to connect, available connection options, Okay. Scrolling down, compatibility, and let's go to connection guide. Okay. So this guide shows you how to connect to a Mongo Atlas deployment. You're going to start with your connection string, connection URI. The connection URI is a set of instructions that the driver uses to connect to a deployment and instructs the driver on how to connect to MongoDB and how it should behave. The following example shows the connection. So this is the connection string that we were just looking at, like literally back here. This is our connection string. MongoDB plus SRV is our protocol, credentials, IP URL, and ports, and then some options come at the very end. Again, all of this is basically configured for us. In this example, we connect to a MongoDB. It breaks that down. Atlas connection example. Now, what we don't have here is an Express app. Notice there is no Express app here. But if you kind of scroll down on this page, it does give you some source code that brings in a Mongo client and a server version. Now again, this is kind of using the require syntax. We can refactor this to use the newer syntax. So the following code shows you how to specify the connection string. And so this source code, literally, there's a copy here. We could start with this, right? Let's copy this source code and paste it in our index.js. And then we're going to update our connection string URI with this piece right here. So let's copy our connection string and paste it, replace what's there. Now it does need to go in quotes, so I will keep it inside of quotes. And I will update my password to be my correct password, and frankly it's not super sensitive, so no one's gonna mess with it. So let me update my password. If I go to my passwords here, I'm going to delete all of that and paste in my password. So kind of step one, you're kind of seeing we're bringing in a method called Mongo client, right? So this is essentially our import, right? We're importing Mongo client and this other server app version variable. Here we're creating this variable called client, calling Mongo client, passing it the URI that we just put up there. So ultimately we're creating, on line 7, we're creating this variable called client. Then inside of this function, we're running a connect method on our client. It's an asynchronous function, so we have to await it. And then we're essentially running a ping command. And if it works, we'll get a pinged your deployment, you successfully connected to MongoDB. Otherwise, in any event, we close the connection, whether the try is successful or not. That's what the finally block does. It runs regardless. So we close the connection. And then ultimately, this function right here is an asynchronous function called run. And we call that function called run, right? So this is kind of just a boilerplate like connect, right? So let's go ahead and see what broke or if it does in fact work. So let's do an npm run start. And we get a console log pinged your deployment. So if everything worked, you should get a ping back. So let's pause here because I imagine some people won't get a ping. And I'll have to troubleshoot with you. Okay, I guess the next step, because this is using the older syntax, maybe we can use the newer syntax. So let's go into our package JSON and change this to the newer module system. So we're going to add a type of module here. So on line 6, type of module. And when we save that, we're going to need to refactor our imports. And so once we have the type of module, let's go over here and bring in line 1 as an import Mongo client. Then we no longer have the equal sign. We just say from MongoDB. Okay, and if I did that correctly, we should still be able to ping. Okay, let's I'm gonna refactor this in a way because this got a connection, right? And this was just bare bones getting the connection with the ping. I'm gonna refactor this a little bit different. So here's our client that uses Mongo client and calls URI. There's a software design pattern called a singleton pattern, and so when I make this, I would make it a little bit differently using this singleton pattern. So I'm going to make a variable, a JavaScript variable called db, and start it off at null. I'm going to make a function called connect, and so we're gonna wind up using this connect function. And I'm probably not going to use this client variable. I'm probably going to refactor this. So I'm going to do a function, async function called connect. And if the database variable is falsy, if the database variable is falsy, let's use our connection string. So we have our connection string right here, right? So let's bring this connection string down in here. Okay, so I just cut my connection string from up above and paste it into my connect method. And I'll just call this my connection string. I'm also going to need to connect to a database. And so we were able to ping before, but now we're actually going to be connecting to a database. So what database do we want to connect to? Let's browse our collection so we can see our databases. And I guess we'll just work with retro Amazon for now. So I'll go ahead and do a DB name of capital R, capital A, retro Amazon. So here we're going to connect via our connection string, so Mongo client.connect, passing in our connection string. And I'm not going to pass in any other options. And then I'm going to assign this variable equal to client.db.dbName. So we're essentially connecting into this database, assigning this variable equal to our connection, which is made via this client variable, which is called here. And then this function is going to return _db. And now I'm going to make a method called ping. So I kind of refactored this client and redid this in my own kind of way. So I should be able to comment all of this out. Okay, maybe we just comment it out for now. Notice we're not calling connect. So let's make another method called ping. Async function ping. So this is very close, right? Const db is we're calling. So notice the first thing that our ping does. The first thing that our ping does is it calls the connect method. So we're going to ping, when we call ping, it connects to our database. and then it runs that ping command. Await db command ping1. And I'm going to do a console log. Okay, so you can kind of see we're just refactoring this a little bit. And it's just refactoring it in what's called a singleton pattern so that it's only going to spin up this db variable one time. And if it's still in memory, so to speak, it will not cause another connection to our database. Okay, and we should be able to kind of comment all this out. And now we just need to call ping. Yeah, I commented out everything else. So I just took the boilerplate code that they gave me and I just refactored it. It's essentially going to do the same thing if it works. The only difference I will say is that now we actually are giving it a database name, right? So you're going to notice that our _db is a variable that it connects to the database and to a specific database, not just to the cluster, but more specifically, we're connecting to a retro Amazon database. Yep. Okay, so I'm just going to delete what we no longer need. So I deleted all the comments that we're no longer using. You know, all we're doing when we run index.js is calling the ping method. Ping calls connect. It makes this variable _db, you know, a variable that we can now use in this file. Okay, and now we get to learn how to actually query a database from Express. So that's next. Anything else, you guys? Questions, comments, concerns? Notice I'm not using the server API version, right? So this import statement could be simplified. You could just delete that import. And that would simplify that since we're not using it. Sorry? And if we were to want it to close after it ran? Well, keep in mind, at the end of the day, what we're going to do is we're going to boot up an Express server. We don't have an Express server right here. And you would keep the Express server running until, you know, it's just always running. So the fact that it's still kind of running, it's not closed. If you want to close it, Control-C, terminate the job, yes. And that just brings you back to the command prompt. But the fact that it remains running is fine because that's kind of going to be how it operates anyways, right? You with me there? Okay, so let's write a method to actually retrieve some data, right? So if I go into here and I've got a book collection and I've got some books. So let's write a asynchronous function called getBooks. Now our connect function needs to be called just like it was called on the ping. We're going to call our connect function. Again, what's beautiful about this connect function is it's a singleton pattern. It's only going to spin up one kind of variable here, this underscore DB. It's going to return underscore DB. And so kind of what's happening on line 23, we're making a new variable called DB equal to underscore DB. Okay, so essentially that's our database connection. So now we can reference this DB variable as if it's underscore DB. They're basically two references to the same thing. Yep.
So instead of just directly calling underscore DB, that's like our
yes,
like
a
our
local.
cache, basically make sure it's connected.
Yes, and we're gonna, inside of these functions, we'll just work with this variable instead of underscore DB. You should not find yourself working with underscore DB. Like you basically, you're not gonna touch this. The only thing that's gonna touch underscore DB is our connect function. Okay, so here we're gonna connect. Now, let's. The syntax for this is a little bit different, and I want to point out the differences. You guys just worked in the Mongo shell, right? The Mongo shell command to find all the books. Remember this command? You just had a hands-on test command, right? Maybe you didn't have the .pretty on it. You guys just wrote a whole bunch of test questions on something like this. Notice the syntax in JavaScript is pretty similar but different. Notice our syntax here is db.collection and then the name of the collection in quotes. Now, is my collection lowercase or capital? It's capital and it's singular, right? So let me fix my so-called smart code and give it the proper collection name. It is singular book. Now this find method, find returns what's called a cursor, which is not the data itself. It's what it is referred to as a pointer. So it's not until you call .toArray. So again, there's this new term called cursor, and it's like, hey, this is where the data is. You can get the data in a lot of different formats. There's a lot of ways to read the data. ToArray is the least efficient way for this query to run. It's like saying, hey, find is going to say, here's where the data is. It's going to point at the data, and then you're going to call another method after that that says, hey, ToArray says get all of the data, get all of the records and transform it into array, and then return that into your books. Okay? I basically ToArray is a cursor method that's not very efficient. It's very easy, but if you've got a lot of books, it's not efficient. What would be more efficient would be kind of like, you know how you stream video, you just kind of read a little bit at a time, it downloads a little bit at a time, and it plays a little bit at a time. So these cursors have different methods. ToArray is not very efficient. You're kind of downloading all the data at once, and let's just log the data. Console.log books. Okay, it's not efficient, but it is easy. And let's just call get books. And let's close this down and run start. And voila. Okay, now I don't have a lot of books. So, you know, the inefficiencies of ToArray is not apparent unless you probably have thousands or millions of records that you're trying to read. Okay, so two takeaways on this. Number one, the syntax inside of JavaScript to query a collection is similar but different, right? Here's the Mongo shell command. It's db.collectionname.find, whereas in JavaScript it's db.collection method, and then in quotes the name of the collection .find. Okay, so the syntax is different. That's point number one. Point number two is that this is actually a cursor that it's returning, which is referred to as a pointer. It kind of say, hey, this is where the data is. How do you want to read the data? And this method to the array is a cursor method that says, read all the data, download all the data, and then put it inside of this variable. So it's not very efficient because you're waiting for the whole thing to download. And if there's millions of records, then that's what it is. Okay? So we got a couple hands up. Do you have questions, or is it not working?
I just have a question.
Question, yeah.
So mine, I'm sure it's something I did probably in my database. Is there a reason why in your terminal there's spaces, but mine there's no spaces anywhere?
Spaces where? Like right here?
Like in the strings. Mine has no spaces in the strings.
In the strings right here?
Yeah.
Like in the title there's spaces?
No, title there's no spaces.
You have no spaces?
Yeah, no.
So let me ask you this. If you go into the database itself, I mean, do your titles have spaces in here?
Pretty sure. Yes.
But then when the data is being returned, it has no spaces?
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of going back to our source code here, we now have the starting of our own module, right? Right now this is called index.js. What we're going to wind up doing is we're going to use this kind of connect method and this ping method and get books, and we're going to create our own module, and we'll just call the module database.js, and we're going to put all this logic inside of database.js. So let's do that. Let's make another file here called database.js, okay? And I'm gonna highlight everything, Control A and Control X, and paste into database.js. So index.js is empty, and database.js has some stuff.
Your console log for your ping, does that show up after or before your get books on your console? Mine shows up at like the very end of it.
Well, keep in mind, so these are asynchronous functions, so the order might vary.
Mine shows up at the beginning.
Mine shows up at the beginning as well, but I'm not worried about that right now. Okay? Okay, so now we have this database.js, and what I want to do is I want to export some functions. I'm going to export my connect function, my ping function, and my get books function.
You just copied all the same code from the index.
Yeah, my index is now empty. I cut it out of index and I paste it in database. Yeah, Nathan?
You have to change the start to no database.js?
We're getting there. I'm not there yet. Okay, and what I want to do on index is I want to spin up an Express server, right? So I want to create an Express server on port, 3003, and import Express from Express. We'll say const app express. We'll have a home route that says hello world, and then we'll app.listen 3003, console log. Okay. So I'll pause this, and okay, now we're going to boot up an Express server with some routes. And then when we hit a route, then we're going to call our database code. Okay, let's see what breaks again. We refactored a little bit, so let's Control C and clear the screen. And now clear the screen. And now if I npm run start, it's going to run my index.js. Okay, it says server running on port 3003. That's cool. If I were to boot up Postman, and kind of close. Let me save this request that I just did. That was the Pexels. Okay, save that. Okay. This is not. I don't know that I'm going to save this. So I'm just going to make a new request here. This is a GET request HTTP localhost 3003. We get back hello world, so we hit our home route, and so our Express server is up and running. Here's our home route that says hello world. Let's import. Okay, so when we do imports, we gotta connect a ping and get books. So let me bring that in. One second. Okay, how I like to do this is yes.
I'm sorry, it's acting as if I don't have Express.
Oh, no problem. Let me pause. Okay, what I want to do, I'm going to bring in my whole DB module. Import DB module from database.js. Okay, so there's kind of three things that we're exporting, and then if you import it this way, we can call on all three of those methods if we need to. So what I'm going to do here is I'll do const db equals await connect db module dot connect. Now this is going to make this await. This makes this async, so we need to add the word async here. Right? Since we're awaiting something, we need to mark this anonymous function as async. So our home route is now async. We're connecting to our database, which, keep in mind, connect should call I believe connect should call ping. If I'm not mistaken, connect does not call ping. Okay, so we're going to connect first, and then we're going to get our data. Const books equals await. Call that same logic there. Res.status 200.json books. And we were mentioning try catches, try catch, ERR, res.status. I guess you would call that a server error, server code 500. Right, your status code of 500 basically says server side error, and then you can kind of send that back in JSON with an error message. Now, we wrote, I'm sorry, instead of querying, let's do DB module dot get books, because we already wrote that logic inside of there. We should be able to call that logic instead of rewriting it. Good eye, good eye. By the way, that mistake that I just made, that Max caught, you and I will have that 1,000 times, and it's worth actually exploring that error message. If you do not await an asynchronous method call, that's going to give you an error message, and I want to show you what that looks like. So now if I close this down, now basically my home route calls this get books method that we wrote, that we store inside of this DB module, and it should send back some books. If I didn't make any mistakes, I'm human, I tend to make mistakes. Let me, okay, so it doesn't find DB module. Now, again, my syntax here might, I might need to fix my syntax. Okay, so let's just bring in connect and get books this way, and then we refactor this to just call connect and get books. So we have these named exports here, connect and get books. I'm going to bring them in this way, connect and get books. Figured my syntax was off there. Okay. And now you can see when I boot this up, we're getting the data right at the home route, and I should be able to go back here and hit this. Close but no cigar. So we are getting it here. Okay, which is good. We're probably missing some boilerplate code to enable JSON coming back from our Express server. It's working here, but when I hit my home route and Postman, it's not. So again, there's a lot of boilerplate, what I call boilerplate code in an Express server. So let's do app.use Express JSON. This was a one-liner. Now, if I reboot this, by the way, we need to reboot our server. Control C, yes, end the job, clear the screen. Run the server, because we're not running NodeMon right now. It's working, but it's not. One second here. Let me see why it's not working. One more middleware app.use. There we go. There we go. I'm going to put this logic in a different route besides the home route, because I'm kind of wondering, we kind of send it back here, res status 200. Let me hit console log. I'm going to do console log home route hit. Okay, I'm thinking hit there. Oh, is it? Okay, let me close it, Control C. reboot it. This is why you bring in NodeMon, right? Let's bring in NodeMon. I'm at a point where I'm troubleshooting enough. I'm gonna run start dev, npm run start dev, npm run start -dev. Okay, now we got NodeMon running, and if I hit the home route, kind of a lot to look at here. Oh, it's just sending it back to the console. That's why it's not. Okay, hold on. So, okay, hold on. So if I go back to database.js, I need to get rid of my. Here's why. Here's why, guys. I'm console logging my books. I need to return my books. Instead of console logging my books, I need to return my books. And now, you see that? You see that derp? Ha ha ha. Life is better when it works. This is beautiful. We now have a RESTful API, right? We have a route that returns a resource. Specifically, it's a web API. Like if you had to take away like one thing here, RESTful API is just a web API, right? Because there are other APIs that aren't web interfaces. Okay, I'm gonna pause it here. I'm gonna come around, make sure everyone's kind of where I am and up and running and working. Okay, so we're back after a break, and just to kind of review, like right now it looks like I got a console log still going on, but if I close this, let me close. Okay, clear the screen. I'm gonna run this using NodeMon, and so I have a package JSON, my start dev script. So I'm gonna do npm run start -dev. And I don't have any console logs going on here, but if I hit my home route, I'm getting my data back. And so, you know, what route should we get all the data back? It's probably not the home route. And again, you can, and we will, extract these into different modules. But, you know, to kind of just get it up and running, I like to bare bones it kind of thing. So let's refactor this. Instead of being the home route, maybe we'll say /API/books/lists. Right? And so now we have to go to /API/books/list and get our data there instead of being on the home route. Right? That makes sense. And so now every time we make a change, Control S, it's running NodeMon, and we're kind of getting rebooting the server. So let's get a book by ID, which we need to write the database logic for this. So here's the route. We're going to go /API/books:/ID. But we need to write a database module, the country version. We're going to write a database method to get a book by the ID. So here's our route, but we need to write some database logic as well, so that when we hit that route, we connect, and then we call this method. Okay, let's write this method that we're going to call when we hit that route, right? We have to write the database query, which is going to be find one. So let's write an async function called getBookById get book by ID. We're going to pass in the ID. Now, what's nice about find one versus find returns a cursor because it's like a pointer at a bunch of data. Find one just returns one record, so there's no like to array after it, right? So we're going to find one where the underscore ID in the Mongo database is equal to the ID that's passed into the method, and then we're going to return that book. Okay, so there's a difference between find, which returns a cursor, and find one, which just returns a single document. Okay, so I will also mention that Atticus was kind of exploring Airbnb instead of, we got 10 records here in our books database, but Atticus was querying Airbnb, and he did notice that this to-array was slow. Okay? And so because he had thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, I don't know, records, he did kind of see a performance shot. And again, there are other methods to kind of call there. Let's export this method.
Did you want to be able to export like all of them to that MongoDB module?
Yeah, so why do I have this black line? Yeah, so there's a different syntax for exporting. I believe it exports star as...
Actually, I think you have to still export them like you were doing, but
Or-
on the import you do import star as DB.
That's what it is. It's the import, okay? So we'll just follow this syntax for now, and we'll change it. We'll change that later, tomorrow. Yeah.
In the function of get books, didn't you already create the list of books in when you return books right there?
Yeah, so on this function, we're returning a list of books, and on this one, we're just returning a single book.
So how come in get book by ID we're calling the data's collection of the books instead of just accessing that books? This is the list right there.
Oh, you're saying right here, why are we hitting the database again?
Yeah.
Because there's no guarantee that you have to run this one first, right? You could just call this function first, right? Good question. Okay, so this returns a single book. Now, there's one trick in this. There's one trick. We're going to be bringing in the ID from params, right? So let's say const ID equals rec.params.id. This ID will be a string. I'm just going to do this. Console log ID. Or actually, instead of console logging it, let's just do a res.status JSON ID. Okay. So when we hit this route, we're going to read an ID from the params, and then we're going to spit it back. Okay, that's all I'm doing right now just to test it. The point that I need to make here, and kind of the trick here, is that that ID is a string, okay? And if you run this query with a string, if you run this find one against a string, it will not work. The data type has to be converted to an object ID. Okay, so if you run this query where ID is a string, it will not work. We have to convert it to I can demonstrate it not working, but let's go ahead and boot this up. Let's hit a new request, http://localhost:/API/books/1234. So we should give it, and we should spit it back ID 1234. I1234 is a string. Okay? That's the current state. This is what we're telling it to do. Okay? Instead, if we scroll up, we need to bring in get book by ID. We need to bring in this method from our database module. We then need to call get book by ID and pass it the ID that's read from the parameters here, but we need to convert it to a Mongo ID. Up here in our Mongo driver, we imported Mongo client. There's also an object ID. So you can also, and I don't think I want to, well, yeah, let's bring in object ID over here. So we're going to read a string over here. We're going to send that string to the method. It's going to come in right here as a string, but we need to convert that string to an object ID. We do so just by this right here. This right here converts our string into an object ID. That should work. That should work. So this object ID is a method that belongs in the MongoDB driver, and it allows you to convert a string ID into an object ID that can be used in a query against Mongo. Okay, so that's going to return a singular book. And now over here, let's say const book equals await get book by ID. This function right here on line 24, this function call was imported up on line 3. And now, if this is all working, we could just send back our book. We're going to throw a try catch in there to handle errors. Let's go back here. Let's get all of our books, and let's get To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm going to copy one of my book IDs. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to paste that up top. And maybe something broke. Object ID. Oh, new object ID. Okay. Maybe that's what I need. New object ID right there. And there we go.
Could you show, what was, I forget the thing you have.
So Express for Express to accept parameters is right here.
There was something like this.
Yes, sir.
Why do you need the new object ID?
The keyword new instantiates an object. So similar, remember in object-oriented programming, every time you wanted to create an object, you had to have the keyword new.
But isn't the ID you're getting there already one that exists?
This ID right here is a string, and so we have to construct an object out of that string with the keyword new, and then you call, this is the constructor call. So it's
So
just,
that's like the value, it's changing the value type rather than.
it's changing a data type. That's all it's doing.
Okay.
Yep, it's changing the data type. It's changing it from a string into an object ID, which is an object. Therefore, the syntax is that we need the keyword new. Anytime you see the keyword new, you just think it's instantiating an object.
Did I see your index?
Yes.
Did your postman return the actual book or just? Okay.
Yep, I returned the book.
Mine just returned the ID still.
Okay, let me take a look. I want to remind everyone that the order of your routes, top to bottom, matters here. If I extract this get by ID and put it above my list, okay, and I reboot my server, notice it's going to interpret the word list as an ID. Okay, and so this will no longer, this breaks this. Okay, so you always have to have your static routes listed above your dynamic routes. So this is a static route versus a dynamic, which is going to change every time, right? This static, it stays the same every time. Dynamic changes every time. So remember, that's just a rule of routes inside of Express, so to keep in mind. And yeah, and now that we're getting the swing of this, you know, what do we do next? Maybe an add new book, right? So let's do that. Let's do a insert book. How about that? Async function add book. Let's pass in a book object. And connect to our database. Now, this insert one command will return an object that we can then examine like a code, if you will. In fact, I'll do a console log result here. Actually, console table. Let's do a console table. Console table the result, and then return the result. And then by looking at all the properties of this object, we can see if it was successful or not successful. Okay, and then now we have this new function called add book. We need to export it at the bottom. All right, so we export the add book. Let's import it over here. Again, there's a different syntax which makes this a little bit less manual. So here's add book. Let's add a new route. This is going to be a post, app.post. Okay, now we're going to read our book from rec.body and spit it all out like that. Yeah.
Would this be counted as a static or a dynamic?
This is a static route. It's dynamic when you got the colon there, and that variable is, yeah, but it's a post. It's a post, so these are all gets. And so to your question, the static routes for gets have to be above the dynamic routes for the gets. Make sense? But because this is a post, it changes, it's okay to put it underneath a dynamic route. So our book is going to be coming in from rec.body. And remember, that's an object. So we'll store it in an object. We'll call add book. And again, try catches are appropriate here. I'm trying to go fast, so just to do minimal code. Okay, if we were being thorough, we would be having try catches to catch and handle our errors. Oh, by the way, just like we had some boilerplate code here, there's some boilerplate for handling errors. App dot it's not important right now. Okay. There's kind of a catch-all that keeps your thing from crashing that we need to add. It's not in there right now. Okay, so there's our route to our add. Let's see if we can add a book. So let's go over here and new. This is you're gonna have to change this. This is your HTTP method, so we're gonna be posting to port 5000, 4000, 3000 localhost colon HTTP colon // 3003 API books add. All right, make sure that route is right /API /books /add. Okay, we're going to send the data over via the body. And let me go to list all books and get the important fields. So it'll make an ID. So let's do title, author, genre. We'll keep it kind of bare bones. Title, author, genre. Title, author, genre. And it said the genre is fiction. How to code. How about that by myself? Click send. Now notice I just send back, what did I send back here? I just sent back the result which came back from the database, right? So the acknowledged was true in the inserted ID. So I just sent that back to Postman to the front end, which isn't really a good message, you know? You could say if acknowledged is true, you know, then send back the book title has been added, something like that. But just to show you, I now have an ID, and if I post that to my get by ID route, well, there you go. There's my data in my database. And of course you can hit Compass or Atlas and see that that book is in fact in the database, and it will persist as long as you don't delete it or if you don't modify it. All right, so again, the database logic here, extract it. Route logic here, this is bare bones, but it works. Okay, does anyone need to see anything? Is anyone's broke? I'm assuming some are broke. You guys are getting the hang of it a little bit, right? You got to write the route logic and the database logic. So with the next one is going to be our update. And that's probably the most challenging. We can collapse these. The route would be app.put. And I'm good with that route. API books update by the ID. So we got the route kind of marked here. And then we'll go over into the database. We'll come back to the route. So let's kind of come back here. Async function update book. We'll just pass in an ID. We're going to need to connect. Now I'm just glancing at the auto-generated code here. That's not going to work, right? So set the title. I mean, we got to be able to update any of the fields, not just necessarily the title. So here's what we're going to do. Let's connect. Const db equals await connect. This is not what I want. I do want to pass in the updated book. updated book, which will come from the front end. Just like before, I'm going to say the result equals to await db collection sub book, in quotes. We are running an update 1. And we got 2 objects that we're going to pass in. The first is our find. So just like we did last time, we're going to find by the ID, underscore ID, colon, new object ID, passing in the ID from the front end. So this is our find. We're finding by ID, just like we did last time. And then we're going to $set. We're going to spread the updated book missing a colon, set colon. And so this will get all the properties. And so a spread is just going to kind of spread it apart into all the properties and values. And, you know, if there's any old fields that need to be updated, it will update them. If there's even new fields, it'll add the new fields. And so this is a condensed syntax to run an update. And then let's return result. So to call this function, we need to pass in an ID string and an updated book, which is going to come from rec.body. And I suppose just like last time, we could console table the result just to take a look at it in the console. We could take that out later on. Okay, let's go back to our route. Bring in the what was it just called? We need to export it first. Update book. So comma update book. So export it there. Import it here. And let's read the ID. Const ID rec params dot ID updated book. Yes. Okay, so let's put this route in Postman. Let's make sure we get the route right. And so new route, http://local host 3003 API books update by the ID. So, you know, we need to get an ID first. This is my book. So let's pull that ID. Okay. So that's the route, and let's change the title and the genre.
We also need to change the get.
And this is going to be a put. I believe we made it a put. Didn't we make it a put? We made it a put. So we changed that to a put. And we're going to change the title, and we said we're going to change the, what? What did I say? Genre. Okay. How to code fast. Okay. And sci-fi. Okay. Acknowledge is true. Modified count is 1. That's good. If I go back to getting a book by the ID, how to code fast, and the genre is sci-fi. I mean, I can go ahead and save these, Control S, and I'll save them to Retro Amazon. All my old routes there are just that. Those were using arrays. We're not even using arrays anymore, right? So I could probably delete those old routes, right? So this, I mean, this is no longer needed, right? So I can delete these because this has been refactored now. I'm not using arrays anymore. So what is this? This is listing all books. So I would just rename this to list all books and save it and hit it. There we go. And if I scroll to the bottom, there's my last book, which is how to code fast. Wait a minute, how to code fast. And if I go to get that book by the ID, now it says how to code fast. So I'm going to save this one, and the request is going to be update book. No, this is get book by ID. Get book by ID, and I'm going to save it in Retro Amazon. List all books, get book by ID. This is add new book. This is update book by ID. Last but not least, I have no idea how we got this far today. I'm super happy that we did though. Thank you for your attention to detail and following along. The last but not least is to delete. So, I kind of don't need these databases council tables anymore because basically working, so I don't need that. So let me save that. And let's write a function, async delete book by ID. Let's delete one by the ID that's passed in. And return the result. And again, we're going to do more with this result object in the future. You know, if it's truthy, do one thing. Otherwise, give error messages, try catches, all this kind of stuff. But deleting a book is not too hard. Okay, we are almost done. So we just wrote the logic to delete a book. Let's bring it in over here. This is going to be on a HTTP delete, app.delete. We got our route, which is delete by the ID, async function. Picks up on the conventions that we've used, right? So this Copilot, GitHub Copilot that I'm using, gets smarter the more code you write. It picks up on your conventions and just reuses them. All right, let's ping this in Postman. API books delete. HTTP:// change the method to delete. Localhost :3003 API books / I believe it's /delete by ID. And here's my book ID. Paste that ID. If I send, okay, good. Error connection reset.
Mine worked. Yeah, mine worked. Mr. G, did you get help you?
Mr. G, do you need help?
Delete book is not defined. we need to bring it in. Update book, comma, delete book. Reboot the thing. Delete the thing, acknowledged as true. List all books. We no longer have that book. Now if I go to get that book by ID, we get a null. We have done CRUD operations on a database.
In 2 hours.
In 2 hours. Hold on. 1 hour, 20 minutes on this video. This was excellent. I'm very happy, very pleased with today. I hope you guys are too. Again, this is a minimalistic so far, right? We don't have any try catches, any error handling. We don't have routes actually in different files. There's a lot more that we could do here, but this is a great start. Tomorrow we will continue.